So welcome to Caritas Consciousness Project. I'm Gloria Quidu, and Caritas is dedicated to promoting the evolution of consciousness as the key to individual growth and global healing. And we do this through online presentations such as tonight, and interviews such as tonight with guest speakers, as well as classes and study groups. And we draw from a wide assortment of philosophical, scientific, spiritual, leading edge studies. And we also hold classes and study groups all online. And we've been doing this since 2003. But we started recording our presentations just a few years ago in 2020. So we have about 90 recordings, somewhere between 90 and 100 at this point. And you can see the video recordings. They're viewable through our website. And also our website is caritascenter.org. And our YouTube channel, which is Caritas Consciousness Project. And you can see them on the video library on our website or on YouTube. As a nonprofit organization, we rely on the support of our members and donors to keep our program going. So if you enjoy our presentations and would like to support this program, you can make a donation or become a member by going to our website. And now let me introduce tonight's guest speaker. Carolyn Baker is a former psychotherapist and professor of psychology and history, and offers life and leadership coaching as well as spiritual counseling for people who want to live more resiliently in the present as they prepare for the future. Carolyn works closely with Andrew Harvey and other spiritual luminaries to live and promote sacred activism, the marriage of affecting change in the world with consciousness transformation. With Andrew Harvey in 2020, she published Radical Regeneration, Birthing the New Human in the Age of Extinction. And I have that book, had it here. It's not here.
But how about this one, Gloria?
Yeah, we covered that book last year at about this time.
Yeah.
And in 2022, this book was published called Undaunted, Living Fiercely into Climate Meltdown in an Authoritarian World. And that is the topic we'll be discussing this evening. I found it to be powerful and helpful and inspiring on many levels. So congratulations, Carolyn. I just really loved your book. Carolyn lives and writes in Boulder, Colorado, and manages her website, which is carolynbaker.net. So welcome, Carolyn, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this evening. Really appreciate it, and good to see you again.
Good to see you too, and thank you for having me tonight. I've been looking forward to it all day.
So can you tell us what prompted you to write this book after the regeneration book that you wrote with Andrew Harvey?
Well, there was actually another book that I wrote right before Undaunted. It was called Confronting Christofascism. And I felt that I needed to write that book, given what is going on in our culture, particularly our country. And then after that, it's like, I really want to put together a book that is kind of a manual for living with sanity and compassion in these times. And I did, in the second part of Undaunted, I put in a section on how do we do this in an authoritarian world. So it's kind of a two-part book. But tonight we're going to focus on the first part, which is Undaunted and living in dangerous times. And so toward the end, I will talk about my next book on a similar topic. And that's why I wrote it. I hope that answers your question.
Yes. Well, it's kind of a how-to book.
Yeah, it is.
Intentionally. And for those of you who haven't read it, after every chapter, there are questions, like to-do questions, journaling questions, and they're really thought-provoking, and I really enjoyed them. I didn't have time to do all of them, but I did quite a few, briefly, and I really liked them. So what do you mean by living fiercely?
That's a really good question. Sometimes people interpret that word as, oh, that sounds angry, or that sounds aggressive. And actually, in the beginning of the book, I kind of dissect that word in the introduction of the book and clarify that, this is about living passionately. Right now, so many people are kind of beaten down, it seems like, by what's going on in the world. And whether we realize it or not, everything around us is affecting us, even if we don't consciously know it, even if we're not following the news. What's happening in these dangerous times is affecting us. And it's easy to kind of feel defeated and kind of feel like, oh man, what's the point? I can't handle one more thing. So this is kind of a gentle, loving invitation to put on our big boy and big girl pants and move forward fiercely with passion. Fiercely to me means with passion. And to understand, we are not the first culture in history that has had to face potential extinction. Many, many other cultures in history have not only faced it, but have been destroyed. And so I think sometimes we tend to feel like victims, like, oh, this can't be happening. Why me? Why, and it's like, let's not do that. Let's put on those big pants and let's learn some techniques and some tools that can help us live passionately and fiercely going forward.
Yeah. When I read the title, I didn't see fiercely as a negative. I thought of, I used to talk about my mother as being fiercely independent, right. So in that sense is how I read it. So you talk a lot about being emotionally resilient, and you give us a lot of good pointers on how to do that. Can you elaborate a little bit on emotional resilience and what that means? How can we be emotionally resilient?
Well, let's just start with the word resilient, which, it doesn't mean necessarily, the ability to bounce back, because we're living in a situation right now in which we can't really bounce back. But can we stay anchored and grounded even as we take action in the world, even as all these things come crashing in on us? And so the reason I start the book with emotional resilience is because I want people to understand what emotions are. A lot of times we talk about emotional things and we don't really have a good grasp of anger, fear, grief, anxiety, and the various emotions that are coming up for us now in these turbulent times. And so I kind of start there, like, okay, what is anger? How do we deal with it? What is sorrow? How do we deal with it?
And you talk about making emotions our allies, which I like.
Yes. By familiarizing ourselves with these emotions and knowing what they're made of and where they come from, we make friends with them, and we don't have to push them away like, oh my God, I feel sad. Why am I feeling sad? Oh no, I'm gonna watch a movie, or I'm going to eat something, instead of feel that feeling. If we're familiar with that emotion and we see it actually in some way as an ally that is trying to tell us something, then we can befriend it and we can utilize it to stay grounded and regulated in these very turbulent times.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things you emphasize in the book is the importance of grieving. And you write that it's not wise to commit to grieving until we have the support we need, because ideally grief, as Francis Weller puts it, should be a communal process. So what kind of support and what do we do with our grief if the support is not available? What do we do? And how do we support each other in our grief?
Excellent questions. I think that the support is always available if we're willing to find it. Even if you're living out in the middle of, podunk nowhere, there are resources. Certainly online, there are many resources. And one of the resources I recommend to people right off the top is Good Grief Network, which was founded and is maintained by Laura and Amy. They just wrote a new book on how to live through the climate crisis. But there's Francis Weller's work. You can read his books. You can attend some of his online events. There are many people who are offering online events on grief. And no matter where you are, you can reach out and get resources to help you do that. And then in your friendships with people, there may be folks who would be available for you if you bring up the topic. Like one of the things Francis suggests is, if somebody's having a really rough time, that you might say, well, would you like to come over to my house and let's get together with so-and-so and so-and-so, maybe 3 or 4 people, and let's just talk about our rough patch that we're going through. Our hearts are breaking right now about something. Let's just talk about that together and support each other. There are many, many ways that we can do this. Because we don't have to be alone with our grief. And it's sad that we have to figure out how to be with each other in grief, because, our ancestors in indigenous cultures just viewed it as a communal issue. It's not a private issue. It's a communal issue. Mm-hmm. And so there were structures built into those cultures to support each other in grieving.
And our culture conditions us to avoid it at any cost.
Absolutely.
And be ashamed of it. Right?
Be ashamed of it, yes, because it means somehow that we're weak, or we're just emotionally fragile, and it's just grief is something you should be ashamed of. You do it privately, for example, in some workplaces. There aren't that many, actually, but some workplaces, you get bereavement leave. And so you can go off in, 4 or 5 days, and then you better come back and act as if nothing happened. You get those 4 or 5 days to grieve, and that's enough. And then you come back and you just be as functional as you were before. Mm-hmm. And don't talk about it.
Yeah. And you also talk about how I don't see the quote that I was going to mention, but you talk about how if we allow the grief, the joy is deeper following the grief. Like we don't feel the depth of joy if we're repressing the grief.
Right. So we're in what Francis Weller calls a flatline culture. You know, we're just supposed to stay like this and not even feel too much of anything. You know, don't feel too much sadness. Don't feel too much anger. Don't feel too much fear. And just kind of, you know, hum along in this kind of lifeless way. You know, it's like when we do that, and those other emotions, fear, anger, sorrow, are repressed, and we're just being flatlined, then do you think that we're going to be able to really feel our joy when we have the opportunity to feel? No, you know, that's going to be kind of dulled as well. So what we know from research on grieving, and we can see it in our own personal experiences is as we grieve, is that the deeper the sorrow, the deeper the joy. That's what William Blake said way back when. Because when we allow those tears to flow, when we allow the grief to happen, then it deepens our capacity to feel joy. I've seen this without exception in all of the grief workshops that I've done over the years. People report that, and it's beautiful to see that joy coming forth.
Yeah.
Should I respond to anything that comes up in the chat, or will we have a special time for that?
We will have a special time. Yeah, we're going to hold off on general questions for a little bit, and there will be plenty of time for it.
Great.
So one of the things one of the terms which I liked, you write that crisis is a quote, purpose moment. So what do you mean by a purpose moment?
I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to. Can you read that?
I didn't write the page number.
Okay.
But let's see. I'll see if I can find it and we'll come back to it.
Crisis is always an opportunity. You know, in the Chinese language, it's the same word for crisis and opportunity.
Yes.
The same character. But
you know, maybe I didn't, it's not my term, but perhaps it's how in a crisis, when we go through a crisis, often we feel it shakes things into perspective and we see what's really important in our lives. And I love the two questions that you ask about who do I want to be and what did I come here for? So the what did I come here for is my purpose, right? So maybe it's that a crisis kind of it almost forces us to think about those things. You know, what is most important?
Well, absolutely, yeah, and then you know, those two questions, I can't emphasize them enough because I'm always asking those questions when we're talking about crisis. Is like, who do I want to be in this crisis? You know, do I want to be just some spectator who, you know, tries to get away from this and not think about it and not feel about it? Or do I want to allow this crisis to be kind of an assignment for me? Something that it's asking something of me, right?
Yeah. Yes. There's that quote by, what's his name, who said, think of this as an assignment,
yes,
as a
Stephen Jenkinson
challenge.
Yes, Stephen Jenkinson said, we're living in dangerous times. We can either see that as an affliction or as an assignment.
Right.
So this book is written out of a plea for us to see the crisis as an assignment. And then the second question, what did I come here to do? Because if I am really being with that question of who do I want to be, then just naturally out of that comes, so what did I come here to do? You know, I can't just be this compassionate person without doing something. You know, I have to extend who I am to those around me.
Yes. And isn't it Andrew Harvey who said, follow your heartbreak. If you
Yes.
don't know, if you
Yes.
don't know your purpose, because a lot of people say to me, but I don't know what my passion is. I don't know what I came here to do. And some people sometimes are even worried that they're going to miss their mission. And I say, you can't miss your mission.
No.
There's no way you can miss your mission. But, you know, I think that his quote, you know, and what Andrew Harvey says, follow your heartbreak, is a wonderful tool, because whatever, if we're looking to do some, you know, do some kind of service in some way to help as much as we can with this crisis, but we don't know what to do, and it feels so overwhelming because there's so much wrong. There's, you know, the climate, there's the politics, there's the economy, there's just so much racism and everything. And where do I put my energy?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's wonderful advice.
We can't make that decision in our heads.
Right.
That's why follow the heartbreak,
Mm-hmm.
and do, you know, it doesn't have to be a big thing.
Exactly.
It can be something very small.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like I kind of walk around, and I invite all of us to walk around with this attitude of, I could be serving at a moment's notice, and I'm not even intending to serve.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's this restaurant that I go to. I try to go once a week because I confess I like hamburgers. Okay. And they have the best burgers on earth and French fries. And there are these two servers in there, two women servers that wait on me from time to time. And, you know, one of them today, she wasn't my server today, but she was there. And she just comes up and sits down. And she goes, you know, it's been a really rough week. And she wasn't like trying to, you know, suck the pity out of me or anything. She just felt free to do that. I said, oh, yeah, what's been going on? She talked to me about working double shifts and all this. And she just started pouring out her heart. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, you want to see my fee schedule before you keep talking. But I didn't say that. There was just this really nice connection. And I don't know what that's going to do for her or not, you know, but she felt free to do that with me. And I, you know, I just kind of walk around with like, you know, is there somebody here who needs something? You know, just a little thing. Maybe they just need a little touch, or they just need a smile and hello, you know. And we think we have to do all these big things. Oh, I have to go out and start an organization and get all these grants and, you know, and do this big, big thing, because unless we do these big things, you know, we won't make it. Well, I'm sorry. Big things, little things, we probably won't make it. But on the way out or through or whatever we have to go through, we at least will be following our hearts and doing our purpose in what we call small ways. But there aren't any small ways. They're all important ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Help?
Yes, I think that's very helpful. And also, if you're looking for a cause to support,
yes,
then follow your heartbreak.
Yes, yes. And
But
maybe,
yes,
you know, again, there we think, oh, there's got to be a big cause. I got to give a lot of money. Well, no, maybe it's going to the local animal shelter and reading to the animals. Read to the animals.
SPCA.
Yeah, they love it, you know, or your local shelter, or foster an animal or something like that. If your passion is animals, there are so many countless ways that we can be serving, and we don't have to have this big grand purpose. Right.
I think it's Carolyn Baker on some recording of hers where she said, what if your mission is to be a light in your neighborhood?
Yes.
You know, how important is that? That is really important. even if you make a difference in one person's life, it's important, right? So, yeah. So one of the causes, I think, of our predicament is our Western tendency to see nature as separate from ourselves, as something in which we don't participate, right? But we need to subdue and control and exploit as a God-given resource to satisfy our needs. And as much as we may intellectually understand that this perspective is erroneous and destructive, and read about the indigenous people's relationship to and identification with nature, how do we go about changing this conditioned attitude? We know it needs changing, and it can't just be changed intellectually. So how do we go about changing it? I have some ideas, but I want to hear yours.
Well, I think it starts with ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
That I am not separate from nature.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I consume depends on nature.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in this interdependent relationship with nature. And I'm also not separate from other people or other living beings.
Mm-hmm.
We are all deeply connected. One of the things that can help with that is meditation. There are different forms of meditation, but, I think one of the things that meditation helps us with, among many, many things, is deepening our sense of connection with nature and with each other. And then we begin to feel and experience, I'm not separate here. Yeah. I'm intimately connected with everybody and everything, even the people and things we don't like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think if we can be out in nature,
of course, yes,
right? That's one way to decondition our separation. If we just, but then I think about the people who live in inner cities and who have no access really to nature.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you could buy a plant, or I don't know, but I think it's very sad, really kind of tragic if someone has no access to nature.
There are a lot of organizations that are putting their efforts into, taking children and adults, into forest preserves, people from the inner city, and teaching them about nature and helping them experience it, feel, taste, touch, smell, experience nature. And any ways that we can support those groups, I think, are really important.
Yeah, that would be really great, to not just teach people, but just let them
experience.
Yeah, let them feel being surrounded by nature. In your book, you make the statement, knowledge devoid of soul has driven us to the precarious boulders onto which our civilization has shipwrecked. Can you elaborate a little bit on that idea of knowledge devoid of soul?
Yeah. Well, that's what most of our knowledge is, or what we call knowledge in our culture.
Up, right?
Yeah. It's all from the neck up, and it's very disembodied.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of our work, and that's, I've got some tools in the book about that. There are many places where we find tools for helping us be embodied instead of disembodied. I think that's something we have to practice through something like yoga or, anything that helps us be present in the body. Because, again, we're all connected, body's connected with everything. And to be tuned into it is not only healthy for us, but it helps us be grounded in the present moment, in the turbulence. It helps us stay healthy if we're much more present with the body. But most of our knowledge, what has come to be traditional knowledge, is very disembodied, and it's, all from the neck up.
Yeah. And that has brought us to the precipice.
To the what? Precipice?
The precipice.
Oh.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
It's I've been listening to YouTube videos with Ian McGilchrist. Are you familiar with him?
Yes, I am. Yeah, he's amazing.
He is amazing. I have his book, the first book. What's the name of it? I don't have it right here. Anyway, which I haven't read yet, and I'm looking forward to when I have time. But he talks about the right brain, the right hemisphere of the brain versus the left hemisphere of the brain, and it's so fascinating when we talk about knowledge without soul, knowledge devoid of soul. That would be how the left brain sees knowledge, approaches knowledge, right? It's just everything has to be concrete. Everything has to be black and white. Mm-hmm. You can't have any uncertainty, right? So that has produced much of what is wrong with our society, of Western society.
I'd also like to add, suggest another person, and that is Philip Shepherd. He's based in Toronto. He wrote a book called Radical Wholeness. He's written several books. Philip's real gift is really helping us be in our bodies. I've attended a couple of his workshops, and he offers a lot of tools for helping us be present in the body and use the body as a way of knowing. Mm-hmm. That not everything, not every way that we know is up here. Right. It's like way below. Mm-hmm. All of that is the body who is its own receptor. It's its own receiver. And when we know through the body, we experience a different kind of knowing that's much deeper and more profound in many cases.
Yes.
Philip Shepherd,
Radical Wholeness.
Yes.
Okay.
And his other book, New Self, New World. He's got some wonderful YouTubes also. New Self,
New World. Okay. So one of the things that struck me in your book, and I'm going to quote you: the more people commit to inner work and service in the world, the less terrified of our predicament they are likely to be. I think these are truly the two most essential things that answer the questions: how do I find the personal resources to meet the upcoming upheavals? And how can I respond most effectively to the suffering of others? Just committing to inner work and service in the world. And we did talk about service in the world.
Well, I'd like to say something about that.
Yes, please.
Okay. So in the book, I talk about rite of passage. Mm-hmm. And I think it's extremely important for us to understand that we are experiencing a rite of passage in the moment. And to really grasp that, I think we have to go back and look at what that was traditionally in indigenous cultures, and still is in some indigenous cultures. Ideally, in traditional cultures, a child was prepared from birth for that time during puberty when he or she is going to go through a rite of passage. Parents prepared the kid for it, extended family prepared them, so that when it actually happened around the age of 12 or 13, This was not like a big shock. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to be going through this, and it's actually an honor. Yeah, it's going to be painful, but it's an honor, and I get to do this. And so, the men took the boys, the women took the girls, and usually somewhere out in nature where they had to go through an ordeal. And that word is really important. They had to go through an ordeal. They didn't just go out there and smell the flowers. They knew they were going to have to go through a very challenging, physically and emotionally challenging ordeal. And it was going to last maybe 4 or 5 days. And the elders who took them out there would be somewhere around, but not real close. Pretty much this was alone. They had to go through this alone. And this ordeal was something that was psychologically and physically really challenging. To give you an idea, Malidoma Somé, who came from the Dagara tribe of West Africa, talked about his ordeal, which was being buried in the earth up to his neck for 5 days.
Oof.
Okay. And they brought him food and water, but you can only imagine what that would be like. So Bonfu Somé, his wife, talked about that the girls were, attached to a tree and hung upside down for a couple of days. Mm. And again, they brought them food and water, but who wants to eat when you're in that shape? And it was, a kind of terrifying experience. And, the earth is swirling if you're in the earth, and the earth is swirling if you're in a tree. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And the idea was reach down inside yourself and find those resources that will help you go through this. Mm-hmm. That's your rite of passage. It's not punishment. It's not torture. This is show up time for you. And then what happens is there's a lot of talking with the elders after this is over. And one of the jobs of the elders is to notice what the strengths and the gifts of the young person are and talk about that with them. Like, I noticed during this ordeal that you were really patient. Or I noticed during this ordeal that you were really resourceful, and then they go back to the village and have a big feast, and everybody celebrates that they went through this ordeal. Mm-hmm. Oh, bless you. You did this for you. You did this for us. Thank you. And then the young person can begin to take his or her place in the culture, in the society. Yeah. So we don't have that, obviously, in our culture. But we have other rites of passage that are failed initiations, failed rites of passages, faux or make-believe rites of passage. Because Carl Jung said there's something in us that is wired for that. Mm. We'll go looking for it. Mm. And, what are gangs, right? Yeah. What are gangs? I sometimes wonder what unplanned 14 pregnancies might be about. Mm-hmm. Where young people go through these ordeals and they don't know what they're going through, but something in them says, I got to go through this. Mm-hmm. So we as adults in this culture in 2023 are facing a rite of passage, and it's confronting us on every level. And so if we can frame our experience as a planetary rite of passage, I'm going through this ordeal, and it's probably going to be a long time. And I don't have the elders there for me. I wasn't prepared for this. So I got to get as much support around me from other people who get it as I can possibly muster. And my job then is to reach inside myself and do that inner work. I get very enlivened and animated about this because I'm very passionate about it. It's about doing that inner work. That is our rite of passage. This is our assignment.
And especially at that time, 12, 13 years old, because, the rate of suicide among teenagers just keeps going up.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
I think a lot of it is because they don't see a future. Everything is telling them there may not be a future.
Right.
And I think that, this is like a collective rite of passage, but if we gave them, it's also, teenage years are the most idealistic time in one's life, typically. Right. And we don't try to channel that in constructive ways, I think if we had something, I don't know, some kind of rite of passage, it doesn't have to be hanging from a tree or buried in the earth,
Right.
But something that honors, what they've come here to do, something that gives them a sense of purpose and a sense of capacity. And, I don't know what it would be exactly. I know they have groups that take kids to, into the wilderness, and they do different things. But I don't know. We just have to maybe figure it out on an individual basis. But
we do. We're all alone in this.
Yeah.
Unless we have the support of people who get it and can support us in our grieving and our inner work. And a very important point is what you mentioned, that when the young person was prepared for this rite of passage in Indigenous cultures, it was all about the future. Mm-hmm. We're doing this for your future. So you can take your place in the culture as a leader and realize your gifts, whatever those are, and serve the community. And so today, we got a bunch of teenagers who don't know if they have a future at all in any way, shape, or form. And so as they look at all of that, why would they? It's just like they're going through school shootings. Yeah. And they're going through all kinds of violence in the culture. Why would they not inflict it on themselves in suicide? Why would they not inflict it on themselves in cutting themselves? Or, many, many ways that you get all these failed rites of passage that they're self-destructive and don't serve them and don't serve the culture.
Right. Yeah. There's such an incredible resource also in, our young people.
Oh, yeah.
And they need to be made aware that they are a precious resource and that they have something to contribute, and let the crisis be a reason to develop that and to contribute, You point out the wisdom, as Carl Jung pointed out, of holding the tension of opposites. Yeah. And when we're able to hold the tension of opposites, Carl Jung says, a third option or way of perceiving a dilemma emerges. Mm-hmm. Recently, I don't know if it was Ian McGilchrist or someone else I was watching, he talked about how, as a metaphor for holding the tension of opposites, he pointed out like a bow and arrow, right? The string has to be pulled on both ends. It has to be, so it's like this oppositional pulling, or else the arrow, it won't do any good, right? And the same with a stringed instrument. It has that tension that is. So in terms of that, would you give an example of this when it comes to societal collapse, like fear versus joy in nature, or what would be some examples of holding the tension of opposites during this time of crisis?
Right. So one of the things to get rid of is the word versus.
Mm-hmm.
because it isn't versus.
Right, exactly. It's resolving the opposite.
Holding both.
Yes.
And that can feel very schizophrenic.
Mm.
And it can feel like, like it takes a lot of energy. But it's walking around in a situation that is very uncertain
Mm-hmm.
and fearful most days. And not knowing where that's going to go. And at the same time, oh, I live in the Catskills. I get to take a walk. I'm
Mm-hmm.
out there and I'm communing with nature.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not just smelling the flowers. I'm really, like you said, talking to the trees.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having this intimate conversation with nature. And, and then I think, oh man, this is going to be gone. And like, maybe 50 years from now, it won't be here. Oh,
or you can even feel guilty about feeling the joy of being in nature, right?
Like this won't be here. So, oh man, so I'm really thinking about that and it hurts me. And, and then look at these birds over here, and this beautiful stream. And I'm walking around going back and forth like this all the time. Okay. And it might feel crazy until you get used to it. But this is life. This is our life right now. This is, and to say, I'm not going to feel these things. That's one part of reality that we cut off. And to say, all I'm going to do is eat, drink, and be merry. That's another part of reality that we cut out. So it's about holding these. And that's hard work. That's really tough work. And that's the only way that I see us being able to move with sanity and groundedness through this time.
Yeah.
It certainly is not about, okay, I've got it all figured out, and by 2055, we're all going to be dead and extinct, or I'm just going to eat, drink, and be merry and not think about it. Either way is really shortchanging our human existence.
Yeah. It's a both and, right?
It's absolutely a both and.
Yeah, it's a both and. So identifying, there's a piece about identifying as either an optimist, such as technology will save us, we don't have to worry, right? Mm-hmm. Or a pessimist, we're all going to hell in a handbasket, right? I like the quote from Meg Wheatley that you included on page 41. I have, and I'm going to read it because I thought it was really good. She says, rather than thinking one perspective is preferable to the other, let's notice that both are somewhat dangerous. Either position, optimism or pessimism, keeps us from fully engaging with the complexity of this time. If we see only troubles or only opportunities, in both cases, we are blinded by our need for certainty, our need to know what's going on, to figure things out so we can be useful. The challenge is to refuse to categorize ourselves. We don't have to take sides or define ourselves as either optimists or pessimists. Much better to dwell in uncertainty, hold the paradoxes, live in the complexities and contradictions without needing them to resolve. So would you talk a little bit about that? I think it's possible to feel both pessimism about the catastrophic times ahead and yet optimism about the human spirit in terms of our essential self being that which cannot be defeated, right? Even as we need to cultivate the ability to live in uncertainty, it seems the very act of accepting uncertainty forces me to live in the present. So that I'm not full of anxiety about the future or depression about the past, but I'm living in the present. Yeah.
What would you like to know about that? Because I was going to read that quote if you didn't.
Oh, for you.
Yeah, I got it right here in front of me.
Minds think alike. Yeah. Well, just maybe examples of, it again, it's the tension of the opposites, right? Holding both,
absolutely
right?
Yeah.
Both have very valid reasons to feel the way they do, but they're also extremes.
Yeah, it's that need for certainty, that need for outcome, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about in terms of service. Mm-hmm. We're so focused on outcome in this culture, like I've got to start this organization, and I got to get funding for it, and I got to do this and hire so many people, and because I got to reach a certain outcome. Mm-hmm. And then we put our hope into that. Meg Wheatley talks about this a lot. We put our hope into it, like, okay, if this just gets big enough and strong enough and well-funded enough, then XYZ is going to happen, and that's going to fix things. Mm-hmm. And that's not appropriate for what we're dealing with. Right. We don't know what the outcome is going to be. We have these opportunities. Wonderful. Do what you can do. Walk around being a light. Walk around being in service. Never knowing when that's going to happen. But you don't get to know the outcome. Refuse to categorize ourselves. I get asked this all the time. Are you an optimist or a pessimist? And then, I keep this book by Meg Wheatley right by my computer so I can pick it up and read this quote.
What book is that?
Perseverance.
Perseverance.
Yeah. Little book, a really sweet little book. And it's just, I don't know what to say. Other than, okay, this is why I'm neither an optimist or a pessimist. Mm-hmm. And that's harder, I think, for young people to grasp, because young people really want to make a difference as they move forward. But I think as we age, get a little wiser, we begin to realize, there's something beyond just being hopeful. In my next book, which I'll talk about toward the end of our time tonight, I talk about hope and depression are enemies. Hope is a setup.
It's always about the future.
Yeah,
it's never about
Yeah.
Now, I'm not a fan of hope either. You're not. Even though when I saw Andrew's book, The Hope, I thought, But then I saw what it was about, and I read about sacred activism, and I love that book. I love that book.
It is wonderful.
Yeah, that idea of hope is kind of dangerous, I think.
And some people call it hopium.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people talk about it. There was another quote by Meg Wheatley I would like to read. She says, "It's people, our relationships, that give meaning to our struggles. If we free ourselves from hope and fear, it isn't outcomes that matter. It's our relationships that give meaning to our struggles. Yeah. If we free ourselves from hope and fear, from having to succeed, we discover that it becomes easier to love. Yeah. We stop scapegoating, we stop blaming, and we stop being disappointed in each other. We realize that we truly are in this together, and that's all that matters." I love that.
Me too. Yeah. One of my faves from her.
Yeah. There was also something that there's so much in this book. I mean, we could go on all night, but another quote that I love is not by anyone, but the author of the book. That's you. where you talk about creating an inner home.
Mm.
And you say, perhaps nothing in current time is more momentous than defining what home means to us and creating and tending our home in the inner world. In a situation where one has lost one's home and possessions, where remaining in a region that has been our home is no longer possible, which is happening in many places in the world right now due to sea level rise, and where one can no longer define oneself by where and how one lives, it's crucial to have an inner home to return to, in quotes. A home that does not depend on external circumstances, but abides whatever those circumstances may be. So would you elaborate a little bit on that? Talk about how do we create this inner home?
Well, by doing this work that we've been talking about and doing the work that the book suggests and offers tools for. And I suppose that I was particularly motivated to write that because on December 30th, 2021, middle of winter, right? We get a windstorm in Colorado. It's very, very dry. And we get a windstorm, 120 miles an hour. I tried to walk outside and I couldn't stand up. And about 10 miles from me in one direction, there was a little trash fire burning, and some sparks from that flew out and started a huge grass fire, and that grew and grew and grew and grew. Traveled across to Louisville, Colorado, and took out about 1,200 homes.
Yeah,
in a couple of hours. And I began to pack things. I mean, I wasn't evacuated, but I thought, oh my God, this is it.
Mm-hmm.
And I, just left the house for a while, took my dog, and we're out and about, and kind of park in some places where there's some shelter, and, and keep listening to, the news on my phone. And, it was really, that was really a moment of truth for me, and awareness that, we have wildfires in Colorado all the time. Mm-hmm. But not on December 30th usually. And so, now I've got my go bag, and I've got some stuff in my car already, and things that I can just grab in case I get evacuated. I'm not planning to be evacuated. I don't want to be evacuated, but I don't know what this summer is going to bring.
Yeah.
And I can't say to myself, oh, well, this only happens in the summer, because that's already been proven untrue. So that kind of motivated me to start thinking about the inner home and how important that is for me, and I think for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So how would you instruct someone how to create this inner home?
The book is the instruction. Book is the instruction.
Yeah. Buy the book.
Can I talk about my next book?
Yes. Sure. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's called Apocalypse Anytime, an interspiritual devotional for living in dangerous times. No, for a world on fire. For a world on fire. So that book is probably going to be available in June. And it's this book's tools on steroids. Okay. So the tools that I've offered in this book, I take them to the next level. It's all about tools and practices. So with Undaunted and with Apocalypse Anytime, you should have two really good manuals for doing this inner work, to create an inner home, to move with sanity and groundedness into and through what we are dealing with.
Mm-hmm. It sounds wonderful.
With no promises that it'll be happily ever after.
Right. Yeah, another topic in your book that I think is very important is shadow work.
Yes.
And one of the things that I have observed in a lot of New Age thinking is that it leaves out the shadow. And I think shadow work is so important because really the shadow has a great gift for us if only we will acknowledge and integrate it. It's always the thing that we need, for wholeness, for balance.
Mm-hmm.
And so would you like to talk a little bit about shadow work?
Sure. Well, when we were children, we learned pretty quickly what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable in terms of our caretakers.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order to survive and be accepted, some of those things that we saw were not acceptable, we sent away. We just said, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be that. I'm not going to think that. And it kind of goes, sort of like a black bag that we're carrying behind us. We kind of throw those things in there. And throughout our youth, there's one thing and the next thing and the next thing that we keep putting in that bag. And it gets bigger and bigger as we mature. And then sometimes long about midlife, the bag explodes, or maybe our life blows up in some way, or maybe we act some way that we didn't think was acceptable. It's like, oh, I wasn't planning on having an affair, but here I am. Mm-hmm. And I just blew up my life and my career. And, what happened? Why did I do that? Oh, my God. So that's one example. But we not only have personal shadows that we need to deal with, we have collective shadow. Yeah. Of course, nations have shadows. And we're certainly seeing the shadow being played out collectively numerous times a day in our culture. It's just everywhere. Mm-hmm. But we have our personal shadows too. And those have caused us over the years to disregard the earth, to become obsessed with greed and power that have caused the predicament that we're in now. So part of the inner work is shadow work. And in all of my books, pretty much, I talk to us about how to do that. And if you want to go deeply into it, I wrote a book called Dark Gold, The Human Shadow and the Global Crisis, which is very worth taking a look at.
Yes. And the original tendency that we stuff in the shadow bag because we want our parents' approval or our teachers' approval. And maybe we don't want to sit at a desk. Maybe we want to be running outside. It's a beautiful day. And we get in trouble for being, not wanting to sit at the desk and squirming and whatever, right, being disruptive. And so that goes into our shadow bag. And Jung said, whatever part of you do not like, you do not love, will become hostile to you. Mm-hmm. And so over time, we start noticing anybody who talks about freedom or loves freedom, we have judgment on. That person is just an anarchist, that they don't, deserve to be on the planet or whatever. And we attract these people because they represent the thing we need to pull back out of the shadow bag.
Right.
And one of the ways we can identify the shadow is we think, I would never do that. We have a judgment. I would never do that as a cue. I'm looking at my shadow.
Exactly. And let me just also say that we send away a lot of positive things.
Exactly.
Sometimes we send away our creativity and, we really are that all qualities that could really help us. So when we do shadow work, we uncover not only the dark shadow, but we often uncover the golden shadow, the bright shadow that we can use to become more creative and more compassionate. So shadow work is not all about uncovering the bad, it's also.
And even what we judge as bad, if we look at it, it's because we've gone to the opposite extreme. We've spent so much energy and time and energy trying to prove to ourselves and the world that we are not that.
Right.
Because that is shameful, right?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the problem is that when we attract it, it's usually an extreme. And we don't want to have the extreme, and that's why we don't recognize it. But if we look, this little technique that I do where I look for the neutral form, then if I look for the neutral version of that behavior, I often will find the shadow where the shadow is appropriate and what I need to integrate, because I've gone too far the other way. Right. But yeah, I agree with you. I think shadow work is a huge part of growing up, and maturing and evolving.
Do you mind if I answer a question here? Because one of the questions is, what are the names of the books on the shadow you're recommending? So I would, for my book, Dark Gold, The Human Shadow and the Global Crisis. And most of my books have something about the shadow in them, but I want to recommend Connie Zweig, Zwieg, on the human shadow. She wrote this book. Let me see. Will you just bear with me for a moment?
Sure.
She wrote a book with Jeremy Abrams called Meeting the Shadow. And she wrote that back in Meeting the Shadow, The Hidden Power of the Dark Side of Human Nature with Jeremy Abrams, Connie Zweig, Zweig. And then she has a newer book called The Inner Work of Age, which is a wonderful book. Shifting from role to soul. So anything by Connie Zweig is on the shadow is wonderful.
Great. Yes. Didn't Marie-Louise von Franz write a book on the shadow?
Oh, yeah. She's an she lived to be 90 something, and she was one of Jung's longtime pupils. And she wrote very mythologically. And so, unless you're familiar with Jung, it's kind of hard to understand. But yes, she did write a very profound book, a lot of material on the shadow.
Okay. Let's open it up now to whoever has a question or a comment. Just remember, if you want to ask your question or make your comment out loud, you need to have your video on because we are recording. If you want your video off, please type your question in the chat. And I see something in the chat now.
That's the one that I wanted to address first.
Nancy LaPlaca.
And Nancy asks, do you think that as we move into more climate and other chaos, that it will be more difficult and more important to stay grounded? Is this happening to everyone, whether they recognize it or not? Yes. I've always been restless, but I'm finding it harder to stay grounded. So more and more work I would suggest on grounding and using these tools that are in my books to help you stay grounded and centered, because a lot of things are affecting us that we're not always consciously aware are affecting us. I know that for me, and probably for some of you too, who are here in the United States, I'm finding myself wanting less and less, and this is not about my age. I'm wanting less and less to go out into the world, because because I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't think that's because I'm a particularly anxious person, because I'm not. But, dozens of mass shootings day after day after day after day, it's affecting us.
I was going to ask you about that, Carolyn.
It is affecting us. Yeah, whether we realize it or not. And so, I live in a Boulder bubble. And I love being in the bubble. But I found myself having heightened awareness about where I am and being a little more hypervigilant than I usually have been in the past.
Well, wasn't it a couple of years ago that there was a mass shooting in Boulder?
Yes.
At the King Soopers.
Yes, there was.
Yes, Mesa. I used to shop there all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oops.
Edna, you have a
I'm trying to raise my hand. I don't know if it worked.
I didn't see it.
I was interested in, Carolyn, in your dark gold including not only the individual, but the world. And I'm just thinking that, that the climate change thing is the symptom of the dark shadow of our world systems. And I don't have the answer to what should be, but I mean, it's really funny because I have a PhD in economics, but I'm an anti-capitalist, and I mean, I think capitalism and self-interest and selfishness, which are kind of the excuse for why capitalism is supposed to be so good, because it's, the invisible hand, which actually Adam Smith never thought that the invisible hand was the only way. I mean, I don't remember what book or whatever, but I mean, he well recognized that we need collective systems. And that's what's so clear here, is that the way that we are living is what the shadow for the world has produced. And I don't have any answers. I'm just thinking in that term, that it extends to the world as you suggested. I just wondered what comments you had on that.
Well, I think you've said it, and I've said it earlier. We're playing out the shadow collectively as well as individually. Yeah. I notice Aziza. Hello,
Aziza. Yes.
Aziza.
She's one of the Afghani students I told you.
Okay. Yeah. Welcome, Aziza. Nancy, did I answer your question?
Yes, thanks. It's almost reassuring to hear that, anxiety is epidemic.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
I'm not encouraging us to be anxious. I want us to be grounded. I want myself to be grounded as well. But we cannot escape the effects of what's going on around us.
And I think it's important to acknowledge it because, my daughter she gave a salon recently in Boulder, and the topic, there was a panel discussing the topic. I don't remember the name of the topic, but at one point a person said they were talking about how Kara, I wish you could help me out here. They were talking about feeling anxiety and feeling I don't remember now exactly. I had written down some thoughts about it, but I don't have them at hand. And when it was open for general discussion, one of the attendees said, I've been going through all of these things that have been described, but I thought it was my problem, and now I realize that it's not, just my problem. And I thought that was so important to acknowledge that, the things that are going on in the world, climate change and everything else that's going on, it affects all of us, It really does, because we're connected. We're all connected. Oh, Aziza is back. Okay. We're all connected. And so I just thought that was a very important point to reassure people that this isn't just you, this isn't just me. This is, we're all picking up on it. Even if our lives are relatively peaceful and quiet, it's still in the air.
Right.
And especially if our lives are peaceful and quiet and we're feeling anxious, we think there's really something wrong, but it is something that is going on.
Well, we're in this situation where people are being reactive to things they don't even know they're being reactive to, like the climate crisis. And so they react with violence, and then other people, that triggers more fear. And then these people over here react, and then they react. And it's just this huge, nightmare of reactivity everywhere. And, as calm and grounded as we all try to be, we can't escape being influenced by that in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's good to know that we're not alone.
Right.
And
we've all been touched by some mass shooting. There's no question. We've all been touched by it in some way. I'm sitting here looking at Cecily, my friend from Hazlet, Michigan.
Yes.
Right on the edge of Michigan State University.
Yes.
Where I graduated from, and also learned transcendental meditation when I was there. And Cecily, it's good to have you with us.
It's good to be here. Never miss anything by you, actually, even the other programs.
Thank you. And of course, Michigan State was, the scene of another mass shooting on February 13th.
Yes.
Students there who experienced mass shootings in their high schools and come to Michigan State and experience another one. So it's
very sad. They're not having classes in that building now.
Right.
They're using other buildings now.
I'm very familiar with that building. I had a lot of classes in that building. I kind of know that building in my sleep. It was a beautiful old academic building, and and there's so little explanation. There's so little of it that makes sense. This troubled stranger just walks in and shoots people. And this is kind of where it's going now, that there's little rhyme or reason, just reactivity.
Right. Yeah. This mass shooting is.
Sharon, where are you calling from?
I'm sorry, was that Sharon?
Yeah, you.
Yeah.
Where are you calling from?
I'm in Richmond, Virginia.
Oh.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. Thank you for everything tonight.
And Jeff, you have your hand up?
Yes, I was just wondering if you had any comment on the political polarization in this country. And there was a settlement last week where, the media or people that are claiming to be news people are just coming out and lying. And I don't know that one side is always telling the truth, but it seems like there's just a mass polarization now in the country between rural and urban, different political parties and so on. I was wondering if you had any comment on that.
I have a lot of comment on that. I don't want to, overload us with that because we have other things to talk about too. But yes, some people have said, people that I respect, have said that this is very much like the United States was in 1861, just before the Civil War. And I think we are already in some kind of civil war in this country. And I don't see it getting better. I was in a discussion with folks the other night in a group that I attend once a week. And one person was expressing their concern that if we continue to demand accountability from Trump, that things will get even more violent. And so we should stop doing that. And my response to that is simply, I think that we are hanging on to democracy as if we are on the edge of a cliff by our fingernails. We are very close to losing our democracy, and to succumb to that threat of violence, which I don't doubt that pursuing him and demanding accountability will cause more violence. I have no doubt. But I have to recall the people in Nazi Germany who called themselves Christian, who, wanted to have peace at any price. And before they knew it, the Protestant church in Germany became the Reichschurch. It was the official church of Nazi Germany, with its symbol was a swastika with a cross in the center. And so my question in this group the other night was, is that what we want? Is that what we want to happen? So I don't know, Jeff, if that answers your question to me, but
yeah, I was just wondering a couple comments. Thank you very much.
Sharon is asking, do you have any thoughts on the benefit of dream work related to inner work?
Absolutely, yes. I'm a huge fan of Carl Jung, and I love his book, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. And I was in Jungian therapy for a lot of years, and we did a lot with dream work. I still write down my dreams from time to time and accept them as messages from the unconscious that are important for me to know. And I may not understand every single dream and be able to fully interpret it, but I do pay attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think as far as inner work, I think our dreams are always showing us the next step in our growth. Yeah. And what we need to know now to meet the challenges that we're facing. So it's always worth looking at them and trying to understand them.
I think dream journals are really important, to just write down your dreams and maybe you understand them at the time, or maybe you don't, but that's you can always come back to them and go, oh, wow, last year I had this dream and that's exactly what it was about, this thing that I just did.
And even if you don't understand them on a conscious level, I think there's a part of us that gets it.
Yeah.
Even if we don't understand it intellectually, because dreams tend to have an alchemical effect. And I've seen it over and over in my dream classes. Kara was asking, and Carolyn, circling back to the beginning of your talk, can you give any personal examples of your own journey with grief and despair into awakened intention?
Well, I really started doing grief work back in the 90s when I was living in Northern California. And I was fortunate to be living near Francis Weller. and also was able to work not just with him in workshops, but Malidoma Somé, who gave us a lot of beautiful wisdom on grief in the indigenous cultures and what it was like in his tribe. In his tribe, they had grief rituals at least once a week, where the whole tribe came together and grieved. So as I experienced doing, my own personal grief work, it really deepened my joy and my passion for life. And I think that's one of the things that has helped me not get into despair about our climate catastrophe and all the things that are going on in the world, is because the most authentic response I can have in the moment is to grieve. And then, and then go from there to take action. But the grieving is really important. I can't shove it away and say, okay, I got to do this about that. It's like, no, stop, grieve, and then act.
Have you ever been part of like a community grieving?
Yes.
Grief rituals. Yes.
Yeah. I have.
And how does that go? Can you describe one?
Sure.
Because I'd love to. I never have.
So Malidoma and his former wife, they're both deceased now. His wife Sobanfu. I was able to be in grief rituals with them, which were they were essentially the same grief rituals that were done in the Dagara tribe of West Africa, where they came from. And it was about creating an altar, and it was better if it could be outside, but you could do it inside too. We made an altar of branches and leaves, and then put a lot of little pots of water around to symbolize tears. And that altar was, directly opposite what was called the village. And the village were people who were there for the grief ritual, who were committed to grieving. And there were a lot of drums. And as people, and we sang a particular song through the whole thing. And as people felt led, they would go down to the altar and grieve. And it was very important that you didn't go by yourself. You took someone with you. And even if that person just stood behind you and had their hand lightly on your shoulder, they were there for you. Even if they didn't touch you, they were there for you. You knew they were behind you. So
the actual grieving was kind of private and individual?
Yeah, it was. It was like, okay, you're at the altar and you're crying, you're discharging your grief, and that person is behind you. They may not even be touching you, but they're behind you. And when you're finished, when you feel finished, then you go back to the village, and that person goes with you. And when you come back to the village, everybody in the village is clapping. Yay! Thank you, thank you, thank you. And you may not feel completely finished after doing that. You may, kind of sing the song for a while and watch other people go down, or maybe go accompany them as they go down to the altar. But you check in with yourself, and if there's still more, you can go back as many times as you want to. Just take somebody with you, and then when you come back, you will be greeted and celebrated. And this can go on for hours and hours. And after it's all over, there's a big feast.
Wow.
And storytelling and poetry reading. And the joy that comes from all of that is just phenomenal. It's just, it's so full. It's so wonderful. And to be able to have that on a regular basis, or, once a month or once a week or whatever, I miss those times. It's something that, and I've done some of the grief, I've facilitated some grief rituals in my own workshops, haven't done that for a long time, but it's just so freeing and liberating and cleansing.
Mhm. Yeah.
Does that help? Any more questions about that?
Don't see any hands up at the moment.
Or comments?
Yeah. No
We don't
chat.
need to just have questions. We could have
Right.
comments.
Yeah. Yeah. So the that event that I was referring to, where someone said, "Oh, I thought it was just me. I thought this anxiety that I was feeling and this even suicidal ideation, I thought it was, isolation, loneliness, depression, all of those things had been mentioned." And this audience member said he'd been feeling all of those things, and he felt that it was just me, but through the discussion of the topic, he realized that it's a collective experience, even global. And this awareness was just so important for him. Not only does it put our suffering on a less personal level, despite our tendency to interpret our feelings as being generated by our personal life, like we'll blame this situation or that situation. But it motivates us also to support one another in whatever ways are accessible to us. And I had written, taking one's life as an escape from emotional pain doesn't end anything except the opportunity to heal.
Exactly. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think community is so important. And now that we're entering the age of Aquarius, community is key, right? That's one of the traits of Aquarius is community and humanitarianism.
Yeah, we just can't do any of this work without support.
Yeah.
It's really important to have that support for each other. For me to have the opportunity to be there for you and you to have the opportunity to be there for me. It's so wonderful to have that. And we're so starved for that in our culture.
And one of the words that hears so consistently when there's a mass shooting and they're describing the shooter, the word isolation, that this person felt isolated.
Yeah.
It's such a common denominator.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. The other thing I wonder about with mass shootings is, of course, guns, right? But also, I think a lot of these people, because they're suffering from mental illness, a lot of them, they're on some kind of psychotropic drug. And a lot of these antidepressants and anti-anxiety drugs have side effects that are, suicidal and homicidal sometimes. And I wonder, you never hear that in the media. You never hear the media talking about that. The drug lobby is just as big as the gun lobby, or if not bigger.
Yeah.
And I often think, because when I think about other countries, there's no other country that has. Other countries have had mass shootings, but it's rare. Yeah. And we have them every day.
Other countries have a very different perception of guns.
Yeah.
I think that's the bottom line. There's certainly other factors, but my goodness, it's like Canada, for one. There are other examples, it's like having a car. You get a license. You have to take a test every so often. There are certain rules around how you use this thing. And there's isolation in Europe, but nothing like there is here, I don't think. And, it was in The Guardian the other day that the Guardians out of London said, you walk up to somebody else's house and you don't get shot, only in America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just going up to the wrong door.
Yeah.
There's
or driving in the wrong driveway, or knocking on the wrong trailer because you think it's yours,
or forgetting your key and trying to climb in your window. Just Sharon is asking, any thoughts on self-harm, not physical but emotional or reputation related?
I don't know. I don't quite understand that question. Thoughts on self-harm. Can you say more, Sharon?
Yeah, sure. I have a loved one who has engaged in that in the past year or so. I would describe it as, for lack of a better term, emotional self-harm or kind of reputational self-harm. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts on it as a reaction to, negative things in one's life or some of the societal stuff that we have touched on. I've just been kind of reflecting on why for some people does pain manifest that way. And I didn't know if you might have any thoughts on that.
Yeah. I don't really. I would certainly hope that this person gets a good therapist or has a place to work on this and has the support they need to do so. There are just a lot of different factors at play, it sounds like. We can all harm ourselves if we have enough stress and enough pain in our lives. Yeah. Whether we realize it or not.
Yeah. Thank you.
And, what we could say to someone who is, who is feeling the need to harm themselves.
Mm-hmm. I try to get them, hooked up with some kind of mental health treatment, certainly. That's just a huge epidemic in our culture right now of, mental illness that, in varying degrees. Some of it can be what looks very minor, and some of it can be, what looks very severe. But if you want to help that person, support them in getting some help.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate the thoughts. I guess one thing I've learned is my experience with the diagnostics for mental health issues is that we have a long way to go. Mm-hmm. So just getting help isn't as easy as I thought it was, even if you have good insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the professionals, even people who have PhDs, do not always get it right. They miss things. So it's just a real challenge. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess I've kind of started to wonder, not that there isn't a place for professional support, but what other forms of support can one engage in to help oneself?
Right.
Because I feel like as a country, we don't have enough resources yet. And even the resources we have, there's a lot we don't know. And there's a lot. So, yeah, there's a lot of gaps.
Yeah. Linda Bazell-Saltzman Linda Saltzman-Bazell, I can't remember. Linda Bazell is a therapist, an ecotherapist in California that is a colleague. And, she does a lot of ecotherapy, a lot of helping people spend time mindfully in nature, which I think any kind of mental health treatment should include that. That if people can just get into nature and have someone there to guide them or support them in doing that, it can really, really help. It can be very, very beneficial. Along with, and if I don't know if you're trying to help this person, but certainly to do some research on who would be a good therapist and get as much information about that as you can. But ecotherapy or just, really quality time in nature can do wonders for some folks.
Also, a
I
support
love that
group.
suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. Also, a support group could help because other people are feeling this way. And if they,
Yes.
if they can share their thoughts and their feelings and
Right.
see they're not alone in those,
Right.
that can be very reassuring.
Yeah. And if a person qualifies for any of the 12-step programs, that is a wonderful place to be.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, the
Yeah.
nature piece resonates a lot. There's some synchronicity with a podcast I listened to recently, just talking about the benefits of nature. So
Yeah.
when you hear that multiple places within a short period of time, it sounds
Yeah. Right.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a question
Or comment.
or comment?
I'm just have a question for Carolyn.
Sure. Hi, Francie.
Hi, Carolyn. I guess I'm just wondering what is driving so much fear in our culture. The fact that someone would shoot someone that comes up to their door, comes up their driveway, these horrible things that are happening. It's fear driven, clearly. And so what is happening to us that people are so fearful? That's what I really don't understand. So I would appreciate your thoughts on that.
I don't know that I can enlighten us on that. I mean, it's just fear is like a chain reaction, I think we all have a basic fear of what's happening with the climate, with the planet, whether we know about it or not, it doesn't matter. There's fear about our future survival as a species, whether we know about it or not. And the stress of life, the pressure of life, the loneliness, the lack of support, the isolation, and the antidote in this culture is get a gun. I'll be safe if I have a gun. So many people really believe that.
I guess I'm wondering if we could build stronger communities, if we could build our stronger communities, that we could be addressing these things. Certainly the isolation.
Yeah.
That maybe that could help.
Didn't you mention, trying to remember, I've been reading a lot of books lately. Carolyn, did you mention in your book about Ubuntu?
About what?
Ubuntu? No?
I don't know if I did. I know what you mean. And
maybe it was the last book I read. That's
a whole philosophy that we don't have in this culture, and
right.
We need to build it in our lives as much as possible. Because you are, I am, and what's the other side?
I am because we are.
I am because we are.
That's what Ubuntu means.
Right.
I am because we are. And so it's this idea that we're all connected and we're all, in this together, and we all need to, another term for the movement, because it's become kind of a movement. It originates in Africa, but there are communities that are trying to implement some of the ideas. And another term that they use is contributionism. So everyone contributes what they can, as in, the way you were describing a tribe, right? An indigenous tribe where everyone has something to contribute. And so they contribute that. And they have I read a book on it. The author, Michael somebody, he's actually white and he's from South Africa, and he was very inspired by this. I think it's a Zulu word, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it is.
But,
yeah.
And so the idea is that the way he's trying to frame it for, Western communities is that everyone contributes the thing that they love to do, that it has to be something that the community needs or can use. But it could be anything. It could be therapy. It could be dream work. It could be, making lace curtains, whatever it is that the person really enjoys doing. And they work at that for maybe 2 or 3 hours a day. And everyone does what they love. And then, of course, there are things that nobody wants to do that have to be done. So everyone contributes 2 or 3 hours a week, doing something that needs to be done. And no one gets paid. That's one of the things that I thought was pretty cool about it, is that there's no money. And it's not trade. It's not trading. It's just contributing, right? So everything gets done. And of course, it works best with small communities because, it's more easily implemented. And I just was quite inspired by the idea. And I know there's one community somewhere in Canada that's doing it. And there are other communities who, it's been a few years since we had a little group around reading this book. It's been a few years since we did that, so I don't know where it's at this point. I've been meaning to Google it, but I don't know.
And this is something churches could be doing. I mean, my goodness, it could be starting little Ubuntu organizations, networks,
Right.
It's like, come on.
Yeah.
But do you not see, Francie, why there's so much fear? I mean, I see it.
Well, yes, but the thing that I don't understand is the increasing fear of each other. In other words, I understand the fear, the anxiety around climate change, things, but the fear of each other that's so severe that we would shoot someone first and ask questions later.
Right.
So this is what I don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is part of setting up a fascist, government is instilling fear, right? Isn't that right, Carolyn?
I totally agree. There was some congressman or state representative in one of the red states. I'm not sure which one it was, but he proposed passing a bill that would create a number for you to call to report any trans person, to report anybody who's thinking about having an abortion. Report. And this is right out of Nazi Germany.
Right out of Nazi Germany.
It's just, let us know if you have any friends who are secretly Jewish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's a manipulation.
Yeah. And with this amount of fear and anxiety and terror that people are feeling, I think we're just ripe for going into that authoritarian, okay, this guy's going to take care of me. He's going to keep me safe. He's going to get rid of all these problems. He's going to get rid of all these Black people. He's going to
provide law and order.
Yeah. So we're ripe for that as a culture. I'm not, but.
Well, most, if not all, great empires, and we are one, have fallen from within, have been destroyed from within, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, so community is key.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And resilience. How can we be resilient in the face of pervasive fear.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I think getting familiar with your own fear and loving yourself through your own fear and taking care of yourself and doing the inner work and getting lots of support and getting and giving.
Mhm. Yeah. Supporting each other.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, Francie, I think that's one of the very important aspects of community. If you have a community that you feel that you trust and you feel close to, and you can talk about these things, I think it goes a long way to assuaging this general kind of fear that we're feeling.
Yeah, I think that's true. The thing I was thinking about is they were not the first country to choose an autocrat because we're afraid. And I spent quite a bit of time in Guatemala, and I never would have imagined it in our country where people are so afraid. And they elected this president years ago because of what he was the mano duro, he was the hard hand, and they were afraid, and he was going to protect them. Yeah. And I think I never would have imagined that in our country, but that's exactly what I see. Yeah. I think this tendency toward autocracy, some strong man is going to save us all. I never would have thought I would see that here, but I feel that's happening here, probably happening in other countries as well now. So it's fear driven.
Yes. Yes.
People are looking for someone to protect them.
Mm-hmm. Yes. We'll see what happens.
So I got to indulge a little humor.
Yeah.
So when I get reelected in 2024, I'm going to appoint a special commission to investigate the trans philosophy and see if that's causing the mass shootings.
Oh, was that actually said?
No. He did say it. He did say it.
Did say it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, I heard it. I can't remember where I heard it, but I heard him say it.
Yeah. Well, you were mentioning earlier about how, if he were put in jail, that it could generate riots, but they were threatening riots, or he was threatening riots upon being indicted, and that didn't happen, right? So
well,
maybe
but the big indictments haven't happened yet, so we'll see.
Yeah, let's see. Okay, well, again, I loved your book. I loved the exercises at the end of each chapter. I thought that was really very well done. Here's a question. What is it like for you to experience happiness and joy? When did you last feel joy? Anybody want to chime in on that before we end? Just to end on a happier note. When was the last time you felt joy? Holding a puppy?
I can share something.
Yes.
I have a granddaughter. She's 6 years old. And she was she says little things and we record it, and she said something like, I may not do things perfectly, because we're telling her it's okay to be messy and everything, because, we all are a bit of a perfectionist. So we are making sure she's not getting that message. So she says, I may not do things perfectly, but in my heart, I'm perfect.
Good for her.
Everybody in our family has now adopted that. We may not do things, but in our heart, we are perfect.
Oh, I love it. That's beautiful.
That's so sweet.
Yes. Children understand that. Children have more understanding that they come in with often than they're able to even express, and then they get conditioned out of it. But
yeah,
I think
elder in my for me. She's my little elder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that would trigger joy in me to hear
Yeah.
to hear a child say that. Yeah.
Yeah, mine is children too. I've been taking my neighbors. I've been taking them swimming because I swim a lot. And these kids, they love it, and they're like around 7, 8 to 11, 13. And they just run around and jump from pool to pool. And it's just so wonderful to see,
Beautiful. Yeah.
But what a dear thing for a 6-year-old to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I have been feeling joy looking at the leaves starting to sprout and spring starting to change the landscape. I live in the mountains, and so it's very obvious here. Every day there's more green, and I pay attention. So, all right. Well, I want to thank you again, Carolyn, for your book and for joining us this evening and giving us your time to talk about living fiercely and all of the subjects that we've covered this evening. And
This is my source of great joy. When I do this, it's great joy for me. So thank you all.
Thank you all for attending. And I hope we'll see you again when you want to talk about your next book.
Yes.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Night.